Here's what the Braves said about their bullpen blowing a lead in Game 1's loss to the Padres. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Friday, March 28th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And I wrote about this a little bit on the newsletter last night. We talked about this in the live show, but Atlanta obviously blew a lead in the bullpen and lost last night's matchup to the San Diego Padres 7-4. I want to talk about the loss. I want to talk about what the Braves said about it. I don't want to dwell on it all episode, right? We talked about it at length last night in the postgame show. It was spontaneous. I had thoughts and feelings and needed to talk them out with you guys. Thank you to everybody who hopped in the chat for that, by the way. But Brian Snitker and Chris Sale discussed the loss last night and discussed the bullpen. Specifically, Hector Néris gave up a leadoff home run to Gavin Sheets to open the seventh inning to pinch hitter Gavin Sheets, and then gave up back-to-back singles to Elias Diaz and Fernando Tatis Jr. before being lifted from the game. And his usage came after Dylan Lee threw the sixth inning. Took 9 pitches to get through the sixth. And after I've had some time to sleep on it and go back and rewatching the inning after the live show, I'm in a weird place. 2 things can be true at once. I say that all the time, I know. 2 things can be true at once. Hector Néris struggled and blew that game. You can understand why they went to Hector Néris over keeping Dylan Lee in the game or going to Deisabel Hernandez or Aniel De Los Santos or somebody else. Let's go into what the team said about it, some of what went into that decision, and then we're going to move on, right? We're going to flush this, we're going to move on, and we're going to look at Friday night's matchup, Reynaldo López versus Dylan Cease. And I think the first thing here is, when I go back and I look at the at-bats, those 3 at-bats, to Sheets, to Tatis, to Diaz. I keep forgetting Elias Diaz's name. Néris got to 2 strikes on all 3 guys and just couldn't seem to put them away. Which, obviously, yes, that's frustrating. That's incredibly frustrating. And his velocity, like his fastball in that outing, was actually a little bit harder than last year. It was harder than it was in 2023 when he was really good with the Astros. He had a 1.71 ERA in 2023. He got to 2 strikes against everybody. He averaged 93 and change on the fastball. The Gavin Sheets homer was up and away, very edge of the strike zone on a 93.5 mile-an-hour fastball. Like, it was a dot. It was a good pitch. And if I'm running that at-bat, if I'm Drake Baldwin calling these pitches, I don't think I call anything different. You don't want to walk the leadoff man. You haven't thrown him anything inside. He hasn't, you've been trying to get him to chase a little bit down and away. You get a little bit of a chase, but not all of it. That was a good pitch. He executed the plan. They just hit it. And Snit had a lot of thoughts. Chris Sale had thoughts on this. And to nobody's surprise, right, they weren't blaming Hector Néris for this. We're going to get to their comments in just a second. But I'm thinking about the process of how this works, okay? You had Dylan Lee for the 6th inning. 9 pitches, 3 outs, no strikeouts, no walks, whatever. I understand the thought process to not bring him back for the 7th. I touched on this last night in the live show. I understand the process to not bring him back for the 7th because, one, you had 3 righties coming up, and it's the 8, 9, and 1 hitters. This was before Gavin Sheets was announced as a pinch hitter, mind you. This was supposed to be Brandon Lockridge. Instead of asking him to do a second consecutive inning, right? Again, in game 1, using who is probably going to end up being one of your top setup men in back-to-back innings, I can see how that is something you want to avoid, right? You use the lefty to get lefty Jackson Merrill, to get righty Yuli Gurriel and lefty Jake Cronenworth out. I understand not asking Dylan Lee to come back. If this is October, does Dylan Lee pitch 2 innings when you have a bunch of off days? Yeah, probably. If there's an off day and you're not playing 7 games in 7 days, does Dylan Lee maybe come back a second inning? Maybe. Game 1 of the season and the first game out of 7, I don't think you do that. You could have a conversation about, could you have thrown somebody else in the 6th? 2 lefties, you needed to throw either Bummer or Lee. So I don't really know if there's a conversation to be had there. It was right to go to a righty. I understand the thought process, and somebody mentioned this in the live show last night too. It's Snit. We all know Snit's going to defer to the veteran, right? So he went to Hector Néris, who has pitched in 608 major league games, over Daisabel Hernandez, who has pitched in 20. From where we sit now, having seen the loss, having seen Hector Néris not record an out, give up a homer and 2 singles, and the Braves lose the lead, can we say, yes, you should have gone to Daisabel Hernandez? We absolutely can. But in the moment, the argument for Hector Néris makes a lot of sense. And the flip side of that argument, you've only seen him pitch in 3 spring games. The other side of that is also relevant. But we have to remember, these coaches, these players, these staff members, they have more information than us. They saw Hector Néris pitch on the backfields. They saw Hector Néris in live BP and in bullpens and all of that. They've seen him more than us. Snit said he was ready. Like, they thought he was ready for the season. So there you go. And it didn't work out, right? It is important to point out, Aaron Bummer came in after him. It also didn't work out for Aaron Bummer. He allowed a hit and a run, walked a guy. It didn't work out for him either. The only reliever that was effective was Dylan Lee and then Grant Holmes in his inning of relief. In case you missed the live show last night, Snit addressed Grant Holmes' pitching, by the way, and in essence said Holmes was available for an inning. So what that tells me is Holmes, who has been announced as the starter for the opener of the Dodgers series, facing Tyler Glasnow, I think that's Monday. Yeah, that's Monday. That tells me that Grant Holmes was scheduled to throw a bullpen on Thursday. Typically, a lot of those happen after the game. If you're a starter who's not going to be in that game, you might wait to throw your bullpen till after the game. And in this case, they used him in the game instead. We see this in the postseason a lot, right? You have a guy scheduled for a bullpen, you just throw him for an inning instead. Holmes comes in, 2 strikeouts, scoreless inning. Didn't throw the kick change once, by the way. Interesting note there. But he's still on track. Snit said he's still on track to start next week. He was available for an inning, and this is because he was going to throw a pin. So let's go ahead and have him start an inning. Or have him pitch an inning. I don't love it. I don't love that it happened, obviously. It's terrible. I hate that I'm defending the bullpen here. But I do think, remembering that this is game 1 of 162, and understanding that, assuming the info that they had where they saw Hector Néris outside of game competition, assuming that info was good, that his pitches looked good, his control, his velocity was all there, then going into the decision, not knowing the outcome, you can make the argument that the decision was correct to use Hector Néris. And again, I hate that I'm defending the bullpen after one game. I slept on this. I thought a lot about it. I, again, went back and rewatched that inning. It is very clear that if you take out the results and you judge the decision on the information you had when you make the decision, it's defensible to have used Hector Néris in the 7th inning. It makes sense. Could you make an argument about using Daisybel Hernandez? Yeah, absolutely you could. He has a lot less experience than Hector Néris, but you've seen Daisybel in person. You've seen all of those. Snit's seen every single one of those appearances. Every single one of those innings thrown by Daisybel in the majors, Snit was in the dugout for. Snit's the one that called for him to go in the game. So can you make the argument for Daisybel? Yes. But I do think it is defensible using the information from when they made the decision. It's defensible to have gone to Néris. And again, he wasn't awful. He had 2 strikes on every guy that he faced. He just didn't get any of them out. And the home run was a dot. That's probably, honestly, 3-2. That's probably the pitch I'm calling in that situation as well. That's the location of the pitch. Give me an elevated fastball up and away. Even if he gets it, more than likely, most guys aren't going to be able to do anything dangerous with that. Gavin Sheets happened to pop it for a homer. It doesn't feel like that's a standard outcome for that type of pitch, a fastball up and away on the very corner of the zone. Again, hate that I'm defending the bullpen, but that's where we are. In just a second, let's get to the comments from Snit and Sale, because they had a little bit of nuance here, and as you can probably assume, also backing up their guy. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Chinook Seedery. If you're a big sunflower seed guy, I'm a big sunflower seed guy. If you're a big sunflower seed girl, my wife's a big sunflower seed girl. Listen, Chinook Seedery is the destination for you. They've got 8 different flavors, from the original flavor, which is just a nice balance of salty and sweetness, jalapeno ranch, lemon pepper, parmesan and pepper, cinnamon toast, dill pickle, hatch chili, smokehouse barbecue, tons of options. Go to ChinookSeedery.com, promo code BRAVES, gets you 10% off your order. Orders of $40 or more also get free shipping with that promo code. Again, promo code BRAVES at ChinookSeedery.com. You can get a sampler to test them all, and then you can either buy a variety pack, which is a case that has some of everything, or you can build your own pack using the flavors that you like off the sampler. ChinookSeedery.com, promo code BRAVES. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about last night's loss before we shut the door, turn the page, and move on and go to Friday night. Brian Snitker and Chris Sale, as commonly happens after a start, the two of them talk to the media. The starting pitcher almost always, even in a loss, the starting pitcher almost always talks to the media unless there's some sort of injury concern. We didn't get Spencer Strider last year with the start against Arizona at home when he left injured, right? But we got Max Fried the next day after he got blown up in the first inning and managed to rebound and stick around for a couple innings. We got Max Fried after that, but we didn't get Strider because Strider was hurt. So Chris Sale talked to the media, and here's what he said. Unfortunately, we don't have audio clips to play you, but I've got the quotes. Quote, "I think it's just the first game of the season, honestly. Anything can happen. This is a long season. I don't put too much weight in guys' major league debuts or the first games of the season because there's a lot going on. You can check it. Néris has been a badass man for a long time, so I'll take him in any situation and in any game." Nothing shocking there, right? Chris Sale standing up for his guy. Chris Sale saying, hey, it's the first game of the season. Stuff happens. Whatever. Sale also specifically talked about the pen in general. Quote, "I think I can speak for everybody in this clubhouse right now that we not only have all the confidence in the world in this team, but specifically that bullpen." One, that's the thing you want him to say, right? This is not a Boston Red Sox situation where Raffy Devers is all mad that he has to DH now after they sign a better defender and it's a whole thing and it's a whole story. This is what you want your veterans to say, right? But I do think there is, to the point that we made, there is some merit on Hector Néris is a major league veteran that knows how to get guys out. He struggled last year. Yes, that's why he had to take a minor league deal, but he's been very good in his career in high leverage situations. Provided that you feel okay with how he looked in spring, both in and outside of games, then absolutely, yes, going to him is an entirely defensible move. And Snit talked about the decision to go to Néris versus some of the other options as well. And Snit's quote here, honestly, we don't know what the right mix is going to be yet until we play these games. We've got 161 left. I like where we're at. Yeah, you want to win the game today. I don't like an inning like that at any point in time during the season. And I do think it's important to remember, and I touched on this in the live show last night. I know I keep referring to that. Not everybody watches the live show right after the game that we did, especially when I didn't tell you guys I was going to do one. But you have a lot of options in the pen. And if this happens again, you can just move on from Hector Néris. It's not like you have to eat a ton of dead money to move on from Hector Néris. It's just a couple $1,000,000 max that he was going to get. It's not guaranteed. You can move on from Hector Néris if you have to and bring somebody else in. Maybe it's Craig Kimbrell. Maybe it's Buck Farmer. You've got options down in AAA. Maybe it's Dylan Covey. Maybe it's Jesse Chavez. You've got options. So provided that they don't keep going to the same guy in this situation and the same outcome keeps happening, it is a defensible decision to use Néris last night, even though it didn't work out. I would expect them to throw some different dudes today. I would expect Pierce Johnson to go. I would expect Daysbel Hernandez to go. I would expect Enyel De Los Santos to go. De Los Santos looks to be promising as well. It's important to remember that 2 different playoff teams last year decided they did not want him on their roster during the year. The Padres gave up on him last year. The Yankees gave up on him last year. He ended up with the White Sox. So those are both playoff teams, and they didn't want him. So all of the information that we had, it makes sense that you went to Néris. It just didn't work out. Let's hope it's better tonight. And speaking of tonight, Dylan Cease versus Reynaldo López. A couple things you need to watch for. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today for Friday the 28th, talking about tonight's matchup, Dylan Cease versus Reynaldo López. And then we know the Braves are throwing Spencer Schwellenbach and AJ Smith-Shaw for the next 2 days. We don't know who San Diego's throwing, so it's hard for me to go in there and give you a full-fledged preview. But for Dylan Cease, the things you need to know about to watch for tonight, 1, he doesn't just have the mustache anymore. He has a full beard, and it's honestly scraggly looking. It's bad. Like, I like to think mine's at least somewhat decently groomed. His is just scraggly, homeless man looking beard. So I don't love it. It's terrible. Go back to the mustache. Strider looks good with the full beard because he takes care of it. Cease looks all like raggedy and stuff. But nobody cares about that because he has such good off-speed stuff, or such good breaking stuff. Last year, most of what Dylan Cease did was fastball slider. Okay? Fastball averages 90, right under 97 miles an hour. It gets more induced vertical break than most guys, so he likes to throw it up in the zone because the induced vertical break, reminder, when you throw it up in the zone, this is where it's backspinning and it looks like it's not dropping like it should, right? The more induced vertical break you get, the less it looks like it's resisting gravity. The whole idea is guys swing under fastballs because they're expecting the pitch to drop more than it does. His fastball kind of got some middling results last year from a contact batting average, all that perspective. 232 batting average, 387 slug. He got a little lucky on the slug. The expected was 433, mind you. So, if he's there. And again, he throws it 43% of the time. Almost the exact same amount of the time, he throws a slider. last year it was an even 43% of the time, okay? And the thing to know about that slider is by run value, it was the number one slider in baseball last year. He throws it a lot, right? He beat Chris Sale by 1 run value, and Chris Sale threw 200 something less sliders than him. But Dylan Cease throws it a lot, and it is a very good pitch. His run value for breaking pitches in general last year at plus 24 was 100th percentile in baseball. And again, that slider was the number one slider in baseball. He allowed a 159 average on it and a 256 slug. And each of those were within a couple points of the expected. So that slider is absolutely a weapon. I've talked on this show a lot about the sliders. You have like a gyro slider shape that goes over 85 miles an hour. He's absolutely there. It's 87 and change. When you look at the movement profile of this slider, it actually doesn't move horizontally, like towards the glove side, as much as a lot of other sliders. It has below average horizontal movement. But it is incredibly effective. It is a very good pitch. So you have to be mindful of that slider today. And what makes Dylan Cease so tough is he throws 6 pitches, right? So it's hard to sit on the slider, okay? If you're trying to sit on the slider, he can go over the slider with a cutter. He doesn't throw it a ton, comes at about 92 miles an hour, doesn't drop as much as the slider, right? So if you're trying to sit slider, you're going to pop up a cutter, okay? He also can throw a curveball, drop it below your bat. It is 82 miles an hour. So like he has the slider, he has a pitch he can throw that looks like it at the beginning that's faster than it. He has a pitch he can throw that looks like it at the beginning that's slower than it, right? One goes above where the slider would land. One goes below where the slider would land. He also has a sweeper, and I struggle with the sweeper. I think he calls it a sweeper, so it's classified as a sweeper, but it has a lot more drop than your standard sweeper. It's more like a slurve, really. So he's got all that, and then he has a changeup. He rarely throws the changeup. He rarely throws the cutter, but he has them. And so because he has them, you have to be mindful. It is very difficult. He also has a knuckle curve too. Like that curveball is a knuckle curve. I probably should have clarified. That curveball is a knuckle curve. But there's a lot of different options here. But it all is predicated on that slider. Everything comes back to that slider. The fastball is good. The fastball is a weapon. The slider is what makes everything work. And we've seen this will be a great test for some of the guys who either have struggled with sliders in the past. Austin Riley's a good name there. The good news on that, by the way, is Austin Riley's pretty good against sliders. He was the best hitter on this team against sliders last year at +7 run value. Marcell Ozuna, also really good against sliders last year. But you've got some guys on here that struggled. Michael Harris was just barely above neutral on sliders. You have some guys that really struggled against them. Matt Olson was also right on neutral against sliders. Orlando Arce was dreadful against sliders, -10. He was dreadful against most pitches, but dreadful against that. Jared Kelenic was at -3. Ozzie Albies was at -2. But Marcell Ozuna, Austin Riley both did really well against sliders last year. And these guys have experience with Dylan Cease. They saw Dylan Cease in 2 regular season starts last year. And dramatically different starts, by the way. Dylan Cease's first start, it was the first game of a doubleheader on May 20th. 5 runs on 9 hits in 4 innings. 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. They won that game anyway, by the way. The Padres won somehow anyway. In July, in Petco Park, he had 6 scoreless innings with only 1 hit, walked 3, struck out 11. The big star of that Petco Park rematch was that slider. So be mindful of that tonight. That's going to be the big thing to watch for. How do these guys do against Dylan Cease? It's all going to come down to, can they not get beat by the slider? Reynaldo López, by comparison, is a power profile, right? Fastball, that slider, those combined for over 80% of his usage. He does have that curveball, throws a couple changeups. I'm really curious to see where Reynaldo's velocity sits in this one. I'll remind you, he, more so than a lot of other pitchers, ramps up his velocity in certain situations. So people freaked out in spring because he was throwing 92, 90, stuff like that. Even in season, he will take quite a bit off early in innings, early in at-bats. When he gets 2 outs, when he gets 2 strikes, when dudes get in scoring position, he can ramp it up. And there were times he was pumping 99 last year in those situations. So I'm curious to see where he sits. I think for that, I want to see if now in his second season of starting, can he be closer to, not closer to his max, but does his average fastball velocity sit a little higher than it did last year in those non-high leverage situations? Nobody on base, 1 out, whatever. Is he still throwing 92, 93, or does he ramp it up a little more, maybe sit 94, and then reach back and get the 97, 98 with 2 outs or with the runner on second base? Kind of what I'm looking for there. The slider, right at 85 miles an hour last year, it gets average horizontal movement, but more drop than a standard slider. So it's a little bit of a different profile from the Dylan Cease slider. Remember, Dylan Cease's slider has less horizontal movement than average. You have more vertical drop and around roughly average horizontal movement for López. So it's a different profile than it is for Cease, but it's still a fastball slider pairing. So 2 fastball slider guys, but they're different in their fastball slider usage and shapes. So I'm curious to see how that goes. That game is, unfortunately for everybody, that is a late game. Starts at 9:40 Eastern on Friday night. Will be on FanDuel Sports South or Southeast. I'm not quite sure which one. I know it's been confusing to a lot of people trying to stream the game yesterday. I think it's going to be air on both. If you have a subscription to one, you have the other, but things like that. This has been Braves Today for Friday, March 28th. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when I drop that next episode, and maybe also leave a 5-star review, maybe with some words of affirmation. That would be super awesome. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.